So I don't intend to say a huge amount here, but I just want to give a little post-analysis of the Singapore summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Um, Obviously, there's going to be a lot of running commentary about what we've just seen, and those images are understandably being played over and over again. The famous handshake, and I think that this will definitely go down as, if nothing else, one of the most memorable events, certainly of the year and probably of the decade. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the headlines today, for this from the London Times. The Metro, which is a free newspaper in the UK. That really says it all as to how many are viewing this. And this is actually the Week magazine from earlier this week. I think there is a significant degree of healthy wariness, if not cynicism. And I say that is healthy. You know, there are some of the president, by which I mean President Trump's supporters, who, are not happy about what they see as overt cynicism from the president's critics. But there is one point worth bearing in mind. Trump has went out of his way on this. It's been a massive gamble. Um, Courting a man who is arguably the world's worst dictator, who presides over a vicious, brutal regime. Now, had Obama done the same thing, the Republicans, at least the hawkish Republicans, would have absolutely savaged him. You could just imagine the analysis on Fox News. So you can imagine, now Sean Hannity and the like are praising Trump and denouncing his critics for being too pessimistic. But just imagine had the situation, had Obama done this. Now, he didn't, as historic record, he didn't do it, but I think we know what the answer would be. So, in terms of the domestic partisan feelings on this, that's worth bearing in mind. But there are plenty of Republicans who are also very cautious about this. Um, it has to be said that President Moon of South Korea is one of the optimists. He was watching it from the Blue House in Seoul, and he certainly seemed to be optimistic. The Chinese seem to be cautiously optimistic, so does the European Union. In fact, China has been really blowing its own trumpet on this, maybe with some justification. China did play an important role. They apparently provided Kim with the jumbo jet that took him to the Singapore summit. Um, Lee Hsien Loong, of course, has been playing up Singapore's role. Well, Singapore is critical to this. Um, I'll be honest, there are some things that make me uneasy. The fact that Kim was being treated almost like a rock star in Singapore, going out to nightlife and getting selfies and so on, it was a bit. Let's not forget, this is a guy who had his own brother killed in neighboring Malaysia just last year. So I'm a bit uneasy about how much credit is being given to Kim. Yes, it is a big gamble for him too. Apparently, he fears assassination, which is one reason he borrowed the jet from the Chinese. The other is he doesn't have one of his own. But yeah, apparently he even has decoy jets. Um, but I think that we need to be careful not to give overdue praise to Kim, because only time will tell if there's any sincerity whatsoever, if this is a genuine detente, or if, in a worst case scenario, he is just using Trump. Now, the president says that things have already been achieved. I suppose you could argue that by getting to this point, that's an achievement in itself, by bringing Kim out of the cold. So I suppose it could be seen that it would be very hard for Kim to go back to the level of polarization there was before. But I have no doubt that within North Korea, this is going to be very highly choreographed as to how this will be presented back home. Um, I mean, there isn't a chance in hell that they're going to make it look like Trump was anything other than the imperialist enemy. They might tone down the language just a little bit, simply because Kim has shaken hands with Trump. But, this is still an absolutely totalitarian state where which has hundreds of thousands of political prisoners, brutal human rights record. Um, Trump says that was brought up, or he alluded to it. I appreciate that the major number one issue is the denuclearization, but Trump seems very reluctant to ever discuss human rights. And that is something that concerns me. This is a president who has a record of praising autocrats and dictators. And you could say, well, that's his job, it's diplomacy at that level. Like I say, Reagan met Gorbachev, Nixon met Mao. Mao killed far more people than Kim Jong-un, but that wasn't their standard practice. Trump has a track record of praising autocrats, and I do find that concerning, especially at a time when he is snubbing other Western liberal democracies. Um, so it's a very strange situation. But in case anyone thinks I'm being too pessimistic, I want to be optimistic. I think there could be some good things come out of this. Possibly, if Kim is serious and the dismantling is truly in effect, and there's been satellite images that have suggested that is the case, that's a good thing. And Trump deserves credit for that. So does President Moon of South Korea. But I do think a degree of healthy wariness is important because whilst this is further than any previous summit or any previous sort of attempt at a meeting between a US president and North Korean leader, um, I think it would be incredibly naive not to suddenly think that the North Koreans have found a light. And Trump was rather gushing in his prayers. Oh, why he's a great guy. He's a man who loves his country, etc. I understand the need for diplomacy, and it's a good thing that it's no longer little rocket man and the old dotard. That's good, but the praise should be tempered. I really do think that the initial point of the meeting, I think Trump played it well. I think he got a good balance, but subsequently he's been rather, I would say, outspoken in his praise, and that's. I understand the need for leaders to have good rapport if they're working together, but in the end of the day, there is no escaping the fact that Kim Jong-un does preside over an appallingly repressive regime. And many Republicans contend that as well. I don't think this is even a particularly Democrat Republican issue back home. But anyway, that's that. So time will tell. Anything else to be said? I'm sure, like the last video, I'll think of things that could be said. That's the only thing for me. If I was to say my feelings, 10 being very optimistic, 0 being completely skeptical, I'm probably about a 5. I'm probably about a 5. I do think it is remarkable that Kim has come to this point, and he himself actually admitted it's been a rocky road. That's an incredible statement of humility from, a man who does not get challenged, certainly not domestically. So maybe Kim is acting out of desperation. Maybe Trump is in the driving seat here, and it's Kim that's been forced into the situation. One thing I will say about Donald Trump, there is a strategy that is somewhat clever. His unpredictability could be a strength because it puts rivals to the United States. It puts those who have animosity towards the United States in an off footing. With other presidents, there was warnings, there was red lines, there was threats of sanctions. Trump really is unpredictable. And perhaps it's the unpredictability of both leaders that has brought us to this situation. So perhaps that can be viewed as a strength. But like I say, that's not necessarily a good thing when it comes to the point of threatening, the infrastructure of NATO. Whilst Trump may make valid points about spending in NATO, um, my big concern is some of the language he's using, about NATO allies is very polarizing. And of course, he backflips and says, "Oh, we've a great relationship. Justin's a great guy, but he's a weak little man as well." So it's these mixed messages. Um, Incidentally, I saw a rather humorous report about from the man who actually fought Justin Trudeau physically in the ring in the charity boxing match before Trudeau was prime minister. And he said, actually, no, he's not weak. At the time, incidentally, Brazil, I think the Conservative MP was called. He was a former a former um, Navy reservist. He was well built. He'd apparently been tipped to win that fight. Trudeau was underestimated, and he actually won the fight. Now that's not really here or there, but it's just a side note. No leaders should be totally underestimated. And I'm not a massive fan of Trudeau, incidentally. I think Trudeau and Trump are two kind of extremes, but there you go. Um, these images are going to play over and over again. There's going to be a lot of analysis. I'm sure I'll think of more things to say about this. I'm trying to, before I round up the video, I'm trying to think, is there anything else that could be commented on? So leave it there for now. Let me know your thoughts. Um, all I would say is that if there is future dialogue, the issue of human rights cannot be ignored. Millions of lives depend on it. And someone in the position of power that Donald Trump has is in a position to, at the very least, speak out on that. I think Trump, in his 2 years, almost 2 years, has year and a half, has has been too quick to praise strongmen, too slow to condemn human rights abuses. Um, Also, on the issue of messages, the situation with Iran. Could we be in a situation where half a year down the line, Trump is reaching out to Iran? Maybe that's not a bad thing, bearing in mind how tense things were with North Korea at the end of last year. Like I say, this 2018, I would argue, has been the year of the Koreas. Both countries have really been in the news. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on the Singapore summit. Keep it civil, and I'll be interested in what people have to say. Thanks for watching.